Out in the farthest stretch of the old western plains, where the wind still carries the smell of dust and forgotten legends, lived a woman the locals simply called Miss Aurelia. She had seen a century come and go. She had buried friends, outlived rivals, and watched entire towns rise and crumble back into the dirt. Yet for all those years, there was one thing she never spoke about, not even when the whiskey was strong or the nights were long. Behind her weather-beaten cottage stood 3 old wooden crosses. No names, no dates. Just a faded red paint mark on each one shaped like a foal. Folks in westalesatdown country whispered about them for decades. Why red foals? Why only 3? And why did Aurelia guard that tiny patch of land like it held the last breath of her soul? Some said it was superstition. Some said it was curse. But those who dared lean closer, those who listened to her stories when she thought no one was nearby, discovered something far more unsettling. Something that changed the way they saw her and the entire valley forever. Before we ride deeper into this mystery, take a second to support Westalesatdown. Hit like if you enjoy true Western legends. Subscribe for more stories from the frontier, and share this video with someone who loves a good old-fashioned mystery. It helps this channel keep these forgotten tales alive. Long before the highways carved straight lines through the frontier, before chain stores replaced the old trading posts, and long before the sound of diesel trucks drowned out the lonely hum of desert wind, the valley folks whispered about a woman who simply refused to let time decide her fate. Her name was Aurelia Boone, though most people didn't dare say it aloud after sundown. They called her the Century Woman, or sometimes in quieter voices, the Ghost of Cedar Ridge. And in the region now known through the stories told on Westalesatdown, no legend lasted longer or carried more unspoken weight than hers. Aurelia lived in a small cottage perched at the far edge of the ridge, a place the land had tried and failed to reclaim. The cottage looked older than the trees surrounding it. Its boards were sun-blistered and silvered smooth by decades of weather. The windows were always shuttered. Smoke rose only in thin threads from the chimney, even in winter. And no one, not even the old ranchers who had known her in younger days, could say for certain what she kept inside. But the strangest thing wasn't the cottage. It was the little clearing behind it. 3 wooden crosses, plain, weathered, untouched by rot, each one marked with a single streak of faded red paint, shaped unmistakably like a foal. People saw them from afar. No one approached them, because Aurelia never allowed anyone to get close. She would step between you and those crosses like a rattler ready to strike, her old eyes suddenly alive with a sharpness that didn't match her age. And she would tell you, in a voice barely above a whisper, some secrets stay buried. For your sake, leave them be. Most folks listened. In towns like Hollow Bend and Gavel's Run, where stories often turned to whiskey-soaked exaggerations, the legend of the Red Foals wasn't just another campfire tale. It was a shadow that followed entire generations. Parents warned their children not to hike near Cedar Ridge. Ranch hands avoided her land at sunset. Even the toughest cattle drivers slowed their wagons when passing her boundary fence, tipping their hats as if acknowledging something ancient, something deserving respect. Curiously, Aurelia wasn't cruel. She wasn't unkind. In fact, she was the sort of woman who once carried extra biscuits in her saddlebag for hungry kids, who stitched buttons for strangers at the trading post, and who quietly donated blankets to new mothers during harsh winters. But she also carried an air of distance. Not arrogance, not fear, but a kind of solemn understanding that separated her from the rest of the living. At nearly 100 years old, she still walked upright, with the proud shoulders of someone who had endured more than she'd ever spoken about. Her long gray braid hung down her back like a rope of silver. Her hands, though wrinkled, remained steady, too steady, some said, for someone her age. And her eyes, well, that was the part people mentioned most. They weren't simply old. They were haunted, not by ghosts, but by memory. The memory of 3 red foals. Nobody knew how she lived so long. Some claimed it was stubbornness. Others joked she was too mean to die, though they never said that within her hearing. A few murmured darker theories, bargains with spirits, debts unpaid, or some curse that tied her soul to that hillside. But behind every rumor was the same uneasy truth. Aurelia Boone had outlived everyone connected to her past. Family, friends, rivals, lovers, all gone. And she remained like a sentinel guarding something the world wasn't meant to know. The ridge surrounding her home was unlike the rest of the valley. While most of the land stretched wide and golden under the sun, Cedar Ridge grew dense with old cedar and juniper trees. Their roots knotted deep into the earth, as if clutching to secrets older than the first homesteaders. The wind there didn't just blow. It carried whispers, bending branches in ways that made even seasoned riders glance over their shoulders. Coyotes never howled near her property. Horses refused to graze on the slope behind her cottage, snorting and pulling away like they sensed something just beneath the soil. Some folks chalked it up to superstition, others to nature. But those who had seen those crosses, those crude red foal symbols, knew the ridge held a story that once shook Aurelia so deeply she never recovered. One of the few remaining elders, old Sheriff Brenton, liked to say, "That woman ain't scared of dying. She's scared of remembering." He had arrested thieves, broken up gangs, and stood toe-to-toe with armed men who had nothing to lose. Yet when he spoke about Aurelia, he lowered his voice, as if even the walls might be listening. The strangest part? Aurelia was not always this way. 40 years earlier, when she was in her prime, she was one of the best horsewomen anywhere west of the Missouri. Folks came miles just to watch her ride. She had a connection with horses that bordered on supernatural. At least that's what the cattle hands swore. She could calm a panicked stallion with a single touch. She could coax a newborn foal to stand minutes after birth. And she trained some of the finest Mustangs the region had ever seen. But everything changed one night. A storm hit the valley, one so violent, the sky turned the color of wet ashes. Lightning ripped across the clouds like a whip. Horses panicked in their pens. And Aurelia, she vanished. For 3 days. When she returned, riding her moray through sheets of rain, she had 3 newborn red foals tied to her saddle. Not natural red, no. Their coats were a deep coppery color no one could explain. Their eyes looked too bright, too knowing, as if they were born with memories already etched in their bones. Aurelia wouldn't say where she found them. She wouldn't say how they survived the storm. She wouldn't even let a town doctor near them. A week later, the foals were gone. A month after that, the crosses appeared, and Aurelia stopped speaking about horses completely. People tried asking her over the years, gently at first, then with concern, then with quiet fear. And each time she'd stiffen, her lips pressed together like she was holding back a scream or a confession. Whatever happened that night carved a scar into her life, so deep she built her remaining years around keeping it hidden.
As the decades passed and the world moved on, Aurelia remained exactly where she had always been, watching, waiting, guarding those weather-worn crosses as if they were the only pieces of truth left from her past. Sometimes, when the sun sank behind the ridge and painted the valley red, travelers swore they saw something moving near those markers. Something small, something shaped like a foal. But when they blinked, the clearing was empty, except for the old woman standing there, unmoving, staring into the fading light. What exactly happened that night? Why did Aurelia swear to protect those crosses for a century? And why did the valley feel incomplete without knowing the truth? One thing was certain. The secret she carried wasn't meant to die with her. Because some stories, especially the ones the West tries to bury, refuse to stay silent forever. The storm that changed Aurelia Boone's life forever didn't arrive like most storms do in the valley. It didn't rise gradually, blowing dust across the plains or rolling in with long, low growls of thunder. No, this one dropped from the heavens like a hammer. One moment the sky was calm, a deep blue fading toward twilight. The next moment, clouds gathered so fast the ranchers thought the world was turning upside down. Horses bolted in their corrals. Chickens flattened themselves in the dirt. Even the coyotes scattered as if the sky was about to split open. By the time the first bolt of lightning cracked across Cedar Ridge, everyone in the nearby towns had already taken shelter. Everyone except Aurelia. She was still on horseback, miles from home, riding her trusted mare, Hismer, an old Mustang with a streak of defiance that matched her owner's. They had been chasing strays earlier that afternoon, but something strange had unsettled the herd. The cattle were restless, drifting toward the woods with no clear reason. Aurelia followed them until the wind picked up, turning warm and electric, humming through the junipers like a warning. That was when she felt it, an odd pull. Not fear, not instinct, something else. Something that made her turn Esmer toward the canyon, even though no one sane would head that way during an approaching storm. She would later tell no one she made that choice, not because she regretted it, but because she never fully understood why she went. The moment they reached the canyon's mouth, the storm unleashed itself. Rain slammed down so hard it felt like the sky had shattered. The air was thick with ozone, sharp enough to sting the eyes. Thunder rolled through the canyon walls like the growl of something alive. Still, Aurelia pressed forward. "Easy, girl, just a bit farther," she murmured, brushing her hand along Esmer's damp neck. The mare trembled but obeyed. If any other rider had tried to guide her into that chaos, she would have thrown them clean off. But not Aurelia. Those two shared a bond forged through years of dangerous rides across unforgiving land. The canyon twisted in front of them, narrowing to a choke point where ancient boulders had fallen long ago. As they pushed through, Aurelia saw something she never forgot, a strange flicker of red light dancing between the rocks. It wasn't fire. It wasn't lightning. It was something in between. Esmer froze. Aurelia felt her own heart skip, though she wasn't sure if it was fear or a strange sense of recognition. The light pulsed, then dimmed, then pulsed again, almost like a heartbeat. Then came a sound, a shrill, desperate whinny, a newborn's cry, but not human. Aurelia's breath caught in her throat. Without thinking, she swung down from her horse and ran toward the sound, slipping on wet stone. Her boots skidded. The wind tore at her coat. The rain stung her face. But she pushed forward until she reached a small hollow sheltered beneath an overhang of jagged rock. Inside that hollow lay 3 newborn foals. They were huddled together, trembling, barely alive. And they were red. Not the reddish tint of a typical chestnut foal. No, their coats shimmered like burnished copper, glowing faintly with every flash of lightning. Their manes were thick for newborns. Their eyes were open, wide, unblinking, almost too aware. "Dear Lord," Aurelia whispered. "How had they survived this storm? Where was their mother? How were they even here?" No mare could have birthed 3 foals alone, and certainly not on slick stone in the middle of a raging downpour. Aurelia scanned the area, expecting to see a fallen horse, but found none. No hoof prints, no blood, nothing, just the 3 foals, and the pulsing red light. Lightning boomed overhead, and Esmer screamed from outside the hollow. Aurelia snapped into action. She dropped to her knees in the mud, sliding her arms under the first foal. It was warm, too warm for a newborn. Its tiny heart hammered against her palm like it was racing time itself. She pulled it close to her chest and staggered back toward her mare. "Come here, sweetheart," she soothed, though her voice shook. Esmer danced in place but lowered her head, allowing Aurelia to lash the first foal to her saddle with her coat. It wasn't easy. The storm tried to rip everything from her hands: ropes, clothing, balance. Twice the wind shoved her so hard she nearly fell. But Aurelia Boone was not the kind of woman who abandoned the helpless. She had delivered dozens of foals in her life, and every instinct inside her roared that these 3 needed her. She returned to the hollow and grabbed the second foal, then the third. Each one stared at her with eyes that didn't look newborn at all. They were deep, intelligent, almost pleading. The last one nuzzled into her shoulder as if recognizing her. Aurelia felt something shift inside her, something she couldn't explain. By the time she secured all 3 foals to Esmer's saddle, the storm was worsening. Sheets of lightning crashed across the sky, each flash closer than the last. Thunder shook the canyon walls. The rain became a torrent. Aurelia hauled herself onto Esmer's back. "Go," she shouted, gripping the reins. Esmer leapt forward, hooves splashing through rising water. The trail had become a river of mud, but the mare fought through it, driven by instinct and trust. Halfway through the canyon, a bolt of lightning struck a boulder near them. The explosion of stone echoed like cannon fire. Pebbles rained from above. Esmer stumbled, nearly falling. Aurelia clung to the saddle horn with one hand and shielded the foals with the other. It was then Aurelia looked over her shoulder, just once, and saw something she never spoke of again. A shape, tall, slender, standing at the mouth of the hollow. It didn't move. It didn't follow. It only watched. Its outline glowed, faintly red, the same shade as the foals. Aurelia blinked, and it vanished. When she looked again, the hollow was empty. She didn't wait for another chance. She kicked Esmer into a full gallop, tearing out of the canyon and into the open valley. The storm followed them like a living force, roaring behind them. The foals whined softly, clinging to life as rain hammered their tiny bodies. But somehow they made a home. By the time Aurelia rode through her boundary fence, the storm had softened, as though it had exhausted itself chasing her. She dismounted, trembling, and cut the foals free one by one, carrying them to the warmth of her barn. For 3 days, she stayed with them, feeding them drop by drop, keeping them alive with blankets and lantern heat. She barely slept, barely ate. Anyone who dared approach her property was turned away. And when the third sunrise broke, pale and cold, the 3 red foals stood on shaky legs and nuzzled her like she was their mother. What happened next, how they grew, what they became, and why Aurelia eventually buried them behind her cottage, would haunt her for the rest of her life. Because the night the red foals appeared was not the miracle the valley thought it was. It was the beginning of the secret she would guard for a century. By the time the red foals reached their first spring, the entire valley had run out of explanations. Ranchers rode past Aurelia's land and slowed their horses, hoping to catch a glimpse of the copper-coated creatures. Children from Hollow Bend dared each other to sneak close enough to hear their unusual whinnies, soft, almost melodic, unlike any horse sound they had ever heard. And the old folk, the ones who still believed in omens, muttered that nature didn't make animals like this without a reason. Aurelia ignored every whisper, every stare, every sign of curiosity she knew was building like pressure behind a dam. She spent her days training the foals, though training wasn't the right word. They learned too fast, too easily. They responded to gestures, not reins, to tone, not commands. She could tilt her head, and they would shift, tap her finger on her thigh, and they would fall into perfect stride. It terrified her. The more she worked with them, the more she realized she wasn't teaching them anything. They were remembering, and Aurelia began to feel like she was raising something she didn't understand, something with purpose. Only one person dared confront her about it, Sheriff Brennan. He rode up one humid afternoon, hat tilted low, dust still clinging to his boots. He was younger then, strong, sharp-eyed, a man not easily shaken. And yet he looked uneasy as he tied his horse at the fence. "Aurelia," he called. She stiffened immediately. She never invited people near the barn. But Brennan wasn't the sort who waited to be welcomed. He walked straight toward her, stopping only when she stepped in front of him. "I need to see them," he said. "No," Aurelia replied, eyes cold. "People are talking. I gotta know what you're keeping out here. What I keep is none of their business. And when folks get scared, when they start riding out here thinking something's wrong, that is my business." Aurelia didn't blink. "They're just foals, Brennan." He snorted. "Foals don't glow at night." She flinched, just barely, but he caught it. He pushed past her. Aurelia grabbed his arm. Don't. Too late. He stepped inside the barn and froze. The late afternoon light filtered through the cracks in the walls, illuminating all 3 foals standing in a row. Their coats rippled like living metal in the dim light. Their eyes reflected the sun in a way that made them appear almost luminescent. But what truly unsettled Brennan was the way they looked at him. Not with fear, not with curiosity, almost with recognition. Ori, he whispered. What are they? Aurelia swallowed hard. I don't know. He glanced at her, searching her face for truth. She didn't look like she was lying. She didn't look like she was frightened, either. She looked burdened. I found them during the storm, she said, in a hollow in the canyon. No mother, no tracks, just them. And you didn't think to tell anyone? What was I supposed to say? But they appeared out of thin air. Her voice tightened. You think folks wouldn't have tried to take them? Or worse? The sheriff looked back at the foals. They were calm now, resting their muzzles on one another. But something about them radiated an energy that didn't belong on this side of the world. You should have told me, he said quietly. That's exactly why I didn't. He turned toward her, jaw clenched. Secrets get people hurt. Aurelia held his gaze. Some secrets protect them. Brennan left without another word. From that day on, he kept a distance from her, physically and emotionally. And as the foals grew, that gap only widened. By the time they were a year old, they were already as large as 2-year-olds. Their coats deepened into a darker metallic red, and strange behaviors started to appear. They didn't sleep like normal horses. They rested in short intervals, never fully lying down. They didn't neigh normally. Their voices sometimes sounded eerily like wind whistling through stone. And at night, sometimes the faint red glow Brennan spoke of would shimmer beneath their skin, pulsing softly like embers in a dying fire. Aurelia didn't tell anyone else, not even her closest friend, May Dorrance, who visited one morning with a loaf of sourdough and an expression that said she was tired of being shut out. May was the blunt sort of woman who believed silence caused more trouble than truth. She walked right into Aurelia's kitchen without knocking, set the bread on the table, and crossed her arms. You're hiding something, and it ain't like you. Aurelia poured her coffee slowly. Leave it alone, May. Feels like something big, May pressed. Something you ain't meant to shoulder alone. Aurelia turned away. Her fingers trembled. May softened. Honey, let me help. You can't, Aurelia whispered. When May left that day, she paused at the doorway and said, Secrets buried too long start suffocating what's alive above them. Aurelia didn't answer. She couldn't, because May was right, and the earth beneath Cedar Ridge was already shifting. Over the next 2 years, the foals grew into breathtaking young horses. Magnificent, powerful, unlike anything Aurelia had seen in her decades working with animals. They ran faster, learned quicker, responded to her emotions almost before she felt them. Their bond with her deepened into something far beyond trainer and horse. It felt like destiny, but with their growth came danger. Neighbors reported seeing red shadows moving along the ridge at night. A ranch hand swore one of the foals vanished into a patch of fog and appeared 50 yards away without leaving hoofprints. Rumors exploded. People wondered if the foals were cursed, or if Aurelia herself had summoned them. And the more the valley talked, the more it pushed toward fear. Fear breeds foolishness. Foolishness leads to violence. One night, Aurelia woke to the sound of footsteps outside the barn. She grabbed her rifle and stormed out, furious and ready to defend what was hers. 3 young men stood there, drunk, emboldened, and trembling. We just want to see him, one slurred. No, Aurelia snapped. You hide in something unnatural, another said. We heard they're wrong. The third stepped forward. Move. Aurelia leveled a rifle. Take one more step, and I'll put you in the dirt. They listened. They ran. But that moment, the raw threat of losing the foals, changed her. She'd buried her fear deeper, buried her compassion deeper, buried everything except her determination to protect them. Because she had begun piecing together a possibility she didn't dare speak aloud. They were not born. They were brought. And whatever brought them might come back. The final tragedy came without warning. One autumn morning, Aurelia found the first red horse lying still behind the barn. No wounds, no signs of struggle, just lifeless, as if its heart had simply stopped. The second died 2 days later. The third lasted another week. She buried them behind her cottage, alone, with shaking hands, and marked each grave with a cross and a red foal symbol, painted with shaking fingers. She didn't know why she chose that symbol. It just felt true, as if it was theirs, not hers. And after she finished the last grave, Aurelia Boone walked into her cottage, shut the door, and stopped speaking about horses entirely. She never bred again. She never trained again. She never rode Esmer again. Something had been taken from her. Something had been returned to the earth. And something, unseen, remained beneath Cedar Ridge, watching, waiting, remembering. The wind rolled off the ocean like a restless spirit, carrying the scent of salt, dusk, and distant danger. At the edge of the coastal frontier, where cliffs dropped into crashing waves and the plains stretched toward a horizon of dust, stood the teenage ranger, Lira Kane, with her Mustang mare Ember stamping nervously at her side. The sun dipped behind them, painting the sky in rust-red streaks, as if the land itself sensed the storm gathering. Lira tugged the brim of her weathered ranger hat low. Tonight was the night everything would be revealed. For weeks, she had hunted shadows, messages hidden in her late father's journal, strange markings carved into driftwood left outside her cottage, and whispers of a secret her family died trying to protect. The truth was out there in the coming darkness, and she knew the enemy had finally moved. Behind her, the ocean hissed against the rocks like a warning. Ember flicked her ears. "You hear it too?" Lira whispered. The Mustang exhaled sharply. From the far side of the valley, a single torch ignited. Then another. Then 5 more. The riders had arrived. Lira climbed into the saddle, tightening her gloves. "If this is the end, we finish it on our terms." She nudged Ember forward, guiding her down the narrow cliff path, heart pounding like hooves against hard earth. The last page of her father's journal replayed in her mind. "When the lanterns burn in a straight line, the night will take what remains of our blood. Protect the key. Protect the legacy." The legacy, her family's greatest secret, lay hidden beneath their oceanfront cottage. A secret people had killed for. A secret someone wanted tonight. As Lira reached the foot of the valley, the torch-carrying riders emerged into the open. 12 of them, faces masked, horses black as coal. Their leader, a tall figure in a sable duster coat, stepped forward and lowered his hood. It was Marshal Creed, a former lawman, a traitor, and the man responsible for her parents' deaths. "You've run out of places to hide, girl," Creed said, voice like gravel. "Tonight ends the Kane bloodline." Lira pulled Ember to a halt. Her pulse steadied. "You killed my parents because you feared what they protected." Creed smirked. "I killed them because they stood between me and the power buried under that cottage of yours." Lira felt the weight of her father's silver key inside her vest pocket. Creed had never found it, and that alone still drove him mad. She shifted in the saddle. "You think you deserve it?" Creed stepped closer, torchlight flickering across his scarred jaw. "I deserve destiny, and destiny ain't for the weak." Lira drew her revolver, spinning the chamber once, a sound sharp enough to crack the tension. "Then let the night decide." Creed tilted his head. "Boys!" The riders lifted their rifles. Lira kicked Ember hard. The Mustang exploded into motion. Gunfire split the night like cracks in a world. Dirt blasted upward. Ember zigzagged through the chaos, muscles rippling under moonlight. Lira dropped low, returning fire with precision her father had drilled into her since she could walk. 3 riders fell, but there were too many. A bullet grazed Lira's shoulder, spinning her sideways. She clung to Ember's mane, gritting through the pain as the mare surged toward the canyon wall. They would never outrun all 12. The riders spread wide, forming a crescent around her. Unless Lira spotted the old Ranger Watchtower perched on a cliff spur. A risky leap, nearly impossible, but nearly was enough. Ember up. The mare lunged forward, hooves digging in as they climbed the steep rise. Behind them, Creed shouted, gunshots echoing. Ember launched off a narrow ledge, soaring toward the cliff spur as rocks rained into the sea below. They landed hard, but they landed. Lira didn't breathe until she heard the riders shouting in frustration below. But Creed wasn't giving up. He guided his men toward the far trail that wound to the watchtower. He was hurting her, always 2 steps ahead. Lira dismounted, clutching her bleeding shoulder. Inside the watchtower, her father once kept ranger maps, coded messages, and a hidden lockbox only the Kane family could access. And maybe something she had overlooked. She pushed open the creaking door. Dust swirled over a map table. But beneath the old canvas tarp was something she had never seen, a wooden chest marked with the Kane crest. Her heart hammered as she lifted it. Inside lay a sealed metal cylinder. On it, her mother's handwriting. For Lira, when the darkness comes, this will be your light. Lira cracked it open. A rolled parchment slid out. An original treaty map showing a colossal underground aquifer stretching miles across the frontier. Untapped water. Wealth beyond gold. A resource that could reshape civilizations. This was the legacy Creed wanted. A future he meant to own. Thunder of hooves shook the tower. Too late. Creed kicked the door open. 3 men entered with him. "Hand it over, girl," he said, revolver leveled. "All your running ends tonight." Lira stared him down. "My parents didn't die protecting a map. They died protecting hope." She flicked her wrist, tossing the parchment into the tower's lantern flame. It ignited instantly. Creed roared. "No!" He charged her. Lira dove aside as gunfire erupted in the confined space. Ember screamed outside, hooves striking stone. One of Creed's men reloaded. Lira rolled, seized a dropped carbine, and fired. 2 men fell. Creed tackled her, the 2 crashing against the railing. The wooden boards splintered under their weight. "You ruined everything." Creed snarled. "No," Lira spat, pressing her forearm against his throat. "I saved it." The railing gave way. Creed tumbled backward, falling from the tower into the darkness below. Lira collapsed onto the floor, panting, vision swimming. Slowly, she pushed herself up and staggered outside. Ember nudged her gently. "Good girl," Lira whispered. With the map destroyed, her family's secret could never be exploited by men like Creed. But that didn't mean the legacy was gone. Her father once said a ranger's duty wasn't guarding land. It was guarding what made life possible. Lira mounted Ember. Her path wasn't ending. It was beginning. She rode toward the rising moon, leaving the tower behind, leaving the past buried with Creed. Ahead lay the frontier, wide and uncertain. But she had her mother's courage, her father's spirit, and a legacy not written on paper, one written in heart, dust, and the wild freedom of a Mustang stride. And she was ready to protect it, at any cost.